Many Black men are emotionally constipated, and we don't know it until we start dumping. And unfortunately, if you have not been given those tools, we dump in ways that are not healthy. We dump in ways detrimental, not only to ourselves, but to other people. And we dump in ways, some of us dump in ways that are illegal, right? And so when you start dumping, everything just comes out. And we have to be mindful about when it comes out. Like toothpaste, once it comes out, you can't put it back in.
Can't put it back in.
Right. And so what do you do with that? Once it's out there, what do you do with that? My challenge to folks is when you start seeing that you're emotionally constipated, you got to get some medication. You got to get help. Medication for me, when I say medication, not in the pills or whatever, but I'm talking about you got to get some help. You got to get around and get with people that can help you. And I oftentimes say, sometimes our best thinking is what got us in this situation in the first place. Mm-hmm. So how do we recalibrate? How do we change? How do we change before it really becomes, in certain instances, fatal?
Right. Because it can become fatal.
Mental illness, as unfortunately, has killed many Black men.
Absolutely.
Depression, where the weight just gets heavy. Mm-hmm. And for somebody like me that has dealt with, anxiety and depression, I know what that weight feels like. Mm-hmm. Right? When there's these expectations, even if it's just expectations that you have of yourself. Mm-hmm. And you're not meeting those expectations, or people see you and view you, and then you stumble and you fall. Like, that's heavy.
It's very heavy.
Yeah, that's heavy.
Because all of a sudden you're not good enough. You're not doing what you're supposed to do, and those negative messages start to play. I'm a failure. I have to be perfect. Yeah. I have to be in control. I'm not doing this right. I should have done more. So all these things start to play, and you can never catch up.
Yeah, and part of my therapy, and just one of the things that I've realized, is that I'm too hard on myself, and I have to, the same grace that God has given me, I have to give myself that grace. And that sometimes is not always easy. No. But I'm learning more so now to give myself grace.
Okay.
I don't care, give myself grace and let God, but I don't, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, I got to give myself that grace.
And it's often much more difficult.
It is.
Tell me how forgiveness has worked for you in all of this.
You trying to make me cry again.
Sorry.
I know you are. You trying. So let me start with forgiving myself first. I think there were areas and things in my life where I had to forgive myself, and it was hard, but I realized that carrying that unforgiveness, again, showed up in other areas, right? So it took well after my mom passed away to where I was able to forgive her. Mm-hmm. I thought I did. When I wrote my book, I thought I forgave my mom. I have a whole chapter called Dear Mama, where I wrote a whole letter to my mom, everything that I wanted to tell her that I didn't get a chance to be able to tell her. And I didn't realize, like, I thought I forgave her, but it wasn't until later that I realized that I didn't. Okay. And I had to go through it because it was showing up in relationships, and it was showing up in, I was cold. So if you did something to me, it was a wrap. Like, I wasn't.
Had no problem cutting people off.
Exactly. And I realized that with my first marriage. I was going through it in my first marriage, and I walked away from that marriage. I walked away from not trying, not putting the work in. That hurt me. It hurt my kids. I walked around just not forgiving myself, not forgiving her, but most importantly, myself. And that was one of the few times where I felt like that I had given up. Mm-hmm. And I told myself that if I ever got married again, that I always was going to fight. I always was going to fight for love. Okay. Right. And fight for what really mattered. But there was, forgiving people is not always easy. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Forgiving yourself is not always easy. But it's necessary. Okay. And when you start really forgiving people, and especially people sometimes you don't get closure. You just got to move on.
You do, because sometimes you'll never get the answers.
You're not going to get it, right? And I think many of us wait for people to say, I'm sorry, and it's not going to come. And so they carry that.
Right.
That's part of that emotional constipation. Like you carry that.
You feel like you've been done wrong. They owe you an apology. And the reality of it is some people you're not going to get it from because they die, they walk away, they change, or they're really not sorry. They're not sorry for what they've done.
Yeah.
And so when I talk to people, about forgiveness, I think forgiving ourselves is the hardest thing to do because our expectations of ourselves is up here. So you can never get up here. So you're going to let yourself down every single time.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I have to remind people is two things. Forgiveness, anger, resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
To die from it,
They're never going to die, but you're going to be sick.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're going to be sick
Yeah.
holding that. So let it go. Let it go so you can move on. It doesn't mean you're okay with what they did. It doesn't mean we have to be friends. We have to be family. It just means that I choose to no longer hold on to that.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to move on.
Oh, yeah.
So, but it is very hard to do. And again, forgiveness is for you. It's not for them.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah.
And it can truly set yourself free, but it is difficult to do. It's something that you have to pray on and practice.
All the time. And practice. Listen. And with that forgiveness, and I have learned to extend to many people the same amount of grace, if not more, that was extended to me.
Okay.
And that mindset has helped me a lot too.
Okay.
Is being able to extend, and especially when people do you wrong, right? Is being able to extend that same amount of grace that they probably don't deserve, right?
That's why
let's be clear,
grace.
right?
Yep.
Yeah, that they don't deserve, but knowing that there have been far too many times where God has given you grace and you didn't deserve it. Right. So we gotta balance that out.
And let them deal with their own stuff by themselves, and we'll deal with our own stuff, knowing that what you do out of your heart from a good space. What they decide to do with it is on them.
Absolutely.
It's totally on them.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else you would like to tell us about your journey, about what you've been through? Because it sounds like it's been a long journey, but it's been a meaningful journey for you.
Yeah, I think I've said this a couple times to people. I think I'm on my fourth life.
Okay, tell me about. I like that.
I think I'm on my fourth life. I think that in this season, though, has been all about betting on myself.
Okay.
And digging deeper into that motivational servant leader. Like I got goals, right? So, one of those goals, and the goals, here's where the shift is. All right. So the shift for me over the past few years has shifted from why I do things. I've always had a love and a heart for helping people, right? That's just at the core of who I am. But what drives me and motivates me now is different. And what's driving me and motivating me now is wanting to have the greatest impact on the greatest amount of people versus chasing money. Right?
There you go.
I think before I had the heart to do it, but because I said earlier that I grew up on struggle and I didn't grow up on love, right? And so I realized that struggling was a trigger for me. And so I have to be able to make sure that I'm doing everything that's in alignment with what God has called me to be and how I show up, which is that motivational servant leader. So I have goals. So I need to, I want to get on the speaking circuit. I want to do podcasts. I want, I look at some of the top, motivational speakers in the world and folks that I look up to. And I'm like, I can be doing that.
Absolutely.
So I need to start betting on myself. I need to take my phone and start recording on my own, all of this stuff and making it happen. right? I will pull. Listen, I ain't a basketball shooter, right? But I will pull from half court because I'm that confident that I'm gonna make it.
You about to be Steph Curry in this
Listen,
piece?
I will pull from the bleachers.
All right, let's be the Splash Brothers then. Let's be the Splash Brothers. We can do this.
I will pull from the bleacher, but I know that God has blessed me with all the ingredients, right? It goes back to what I was saying earlier about circling yourself around, the right people that see who you are and what you're trying to do, and that's going to take you from here to there. So the journey is still, the work. There's so much work to be done in this season, and like in this stage of the life, right? This is where you bet on yourself and you make it happen, and stop sleeping on talents. Like there's so many going around this country and talking. There's so many talented Black men
absolutely
who have been sleeping on themselves because they are afraid, or they don't know how to start. They don't know who to go to,
or they feel they have no space.
That part too. And I don't want to no longer want to sleep on myself. God didn't make me that way.
I love that you said that. And so the Hopi Indians have a saying that the world is on its fourth shaking. So when you said that, I was like, that reminds me of the Hopi Indians, Native Americans. They believe the world is on its fourth shaking. Like there's been 3 worlds before this, and now we're on our 4th. And so that very much reminds me of the Native Americans, the Hopi Native Americans, in saying that. And so creating this world this time around, this is what you get to do, because you write this story.
Absolutely.
You determine how it's going to be. You determine, I'm going to make this shot from half court.
Absolutely.
Or the bleachers or wherever, but it's going in that basket before the buzzer.
If nothing else, I'm going to shoot. I'm not going to hold the ball.
Okay.
And so if there were just a couple of messages or takeaways to give people, and especially Black men. Number one, it's okay to not be okay.
Love it.
It's not okay to stay that way.
I love that.
Right? Like, it's okay to not be okay. Right? Give yourself that space give yourself that space to not be okay. But I say it all the time across the country, like, it's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to stay that way. And then I think that the second message from that is, when you are struggling and going through some things, you have 2 options, right? You can either suffer the pain that comes from changing, or you can suffer the pain that comes from remaining the same, but you can't do both. So you got to pick a struggle. Like, you got to figure out what type of pain you willing to go through. You got to figure out what type of pain you already hurting.
Right.
You already in pain. You already been going through the struggle. So you might as well go through the struggle that comes with changing. And that's my truth.
I love your truth. Your truth is the truth. It is everything. Thank you so much. You come with so much wisdom. I love your vibe. I love how you approach the world.
Thank you.
It is from a stance of vulnerability, but a masculine vulnerability.
Yeah.
And I think that your message comes across that vulnerability is a source of strength.
It is.
Because you have to be strong to be vulnerable.
You do.
And still stand up and do the things you need to do.
And thank you for creating an opportunity in this space for me to feel vulnerable.
Absolutely.
As someone who doesn't mind sharing, I can always feel the energy or the vibe if it's truly safe and if it's truly okay, right? So I appreciate you for giving me that space of being, to be vulnerable in a way that allows me to be who I am, which is that motivational servant leader.
Absolutely. I love it. And I can tell that this is what you're meant to do. You can always tell when you're meant to do something.
Yeah.
So
you move differently.
And then certain people are attracted to you.
Yeah.
So when you were that probation officer, they're like, are you a therapist? And you're like, no. Or have you ever been, and I know you have, in a grocery store somewhere else, and they're like, so so do you know where the plums are? You know, my husband died 2 months ago, and and you're like, dude, I just came to buy groceries.
I'm gonna say this before we go. There's one other thing that when people see me or they hear me talk, right? And this is a whole new separate. And I know I see my wife over there smiling because she knows what I'm getting ready to say. But I oftentimes get, when people hear me, they be like, "Are you a preacher?"
I can see it.
And I'll be like, "Nope, I'm not."
But maybe you are.
But however, what I learned is, and shout out to City of Grace and Pastor Mike Young, who's my pastor, man. One of the things that he is teaching me is that your ministry and your blessing, some of the greatest influential people in the Bible did their ministry and did everything outside of the church.
There it
right?
is.
It wasn't necessarily behind the pulpit, right? And so for me, I know and I can feel the energy and just where I'm headed, that my ministry is out in the community.
Absolutely.
This is ministry. You know, somebody is going to, I'm putting it out there. There's going to be some man, somebody is going to watch this and listen to all of this and say, I need to go get it together.
Claiming it. We're putting it all out into the universe. We claim it all. Dr. Wilson, thank you for blessing us.
I appreciate you. Thank you for blessing me. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, we thank you for watching our podcast. Please join us again. And just remember that life is always better with you here. And thank you.